Hi, I'm Dave from Boyinaband.com, and today I'll be taking you through the process of how I made the Sonic Dubstep remix. I asked you guys what kinds of things you wanted me to go over, and the most popular was the main lead in the track, this one here. So, let's start with that. I did this one in Reason, some of the synths I did in Massive. I used rewiring to rewire Reason and Sonar together. So I could have the VSTs as well as all the stuff I'm used to in Reason. And this synth, it's actually three different synths layered up. We've got this main pad, where I've got those main notes in there, and the bass pad and big bass distortion, both using the same root notes. So just the pad here, and then the distortion. Just a bit grittier, just to give it a bit more body. And then in conjunction with this pad, it sounds like this, making a really nice big sound. Now, this pad, which is the brunt of it, let's see how I've made that. We can see, first of all, there's the compressor with the redrum instance. You'll see this quite a lot because this is low threshold, full ratio. You can tell that it's for sidechain compression. If we hit tab, you can see that the output of the redrum instance is going to the sidechain in of the compressor, and it's got, on the 1st and the 9th beats, I've triggered this bass drum just to give that slow, pulsating, dubsteppy rhythm, which I love that in those pads. The effect itself is made up of 4 different Thor instances. I told you I'm a Thor whore. And as you can see, if we look into these specifically, first of all, we've got the low one here, followed by some kind of mid-range, slightly high, pads panned left and right, and then at the top we've got this one. You can hear the other 2 pads coming through as well there. I'll get rid of them as for now. So we've got that. Add in the sides and add in the bottom. It makes for a lovely full sounding pad. When it comes to making big sounds, don't expect one synth to instantly work. You probably will have to layer things up quite a lot before it starts to sound really big and thick. If you're only making one Thor instance for your sounds and you're wondering why is my synth sounding so thin and weedy, that's probably why. But then obviously the next important thing to learn is how to stop everything from sounding muddy. And the way I've done that is by using a bit of EQ, bringing up the top end here on the high synth, for instance, which is just 3 multi-oscillators. You can see these are slightly detuned from each other, and this one's an octave higher, and that just gives it a nice thick, we've got the chorus on as well to make it even thicker, like a top end wall of sound. Brought up the top there. I'll show you how that works with and without it. Like, it's a very subtle thing individually, but when it comes to adding these top end EQs on every single instrument, it really does brighten it up and stop it from being too muddy. Now the next Thor instance, this one, which is the low end one. Now we've got a noise oscillator in place of one of the multi-oscillators. Noise might seem like a counterintuitive thing to use to make a melodic sound, but it's actually really useful because you can hear it brings this really nice top end fizz to the sound. The way I've done that and made sure it hasn't brought any muddiness at the same time, I've used a state variable filter on high pass mode, went through here, 3, into the amplifier, just to cut off the low end. So feel free to violently slice your synths up. So that's the top and the bottom. We've got these 2, the left and right synths. And now these 2, you can see the octaves here, octave 5 and 4. It's just the same on both of these. It's exactly the same synth as this one with the noise making it a bit brighter, but those octaves are different. We've got 5 and 4 on this one, whereas here we've got both of them on octave 3, just slightly detuned to make it even thicker, and both on different detune modes as well, just to make a nice big powerful mid-range. The noise is a little bit quieter as well, I didn't mention that, and everything's got the full sustain so that it doesn't lose any volume over time. We've got the nice big bright EQing again. You can hear that really affects the sound. Again, EQing is one of those things you're going to have to learn how to do. I've kind of found that as a general rule, if you boost the top and then scoop out the mid-range somewhere, it tends to make things sound a lot nicer. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the sounds I've been using, but that's the kind of thing I generally tend to try. Eventually, over time, you'll start to see what different sounds require. Then they'll all run into the mixer. And I've just taken down a few 6 decibels there of around the 2 kilohertz mark, so the vocals could sit in the mix a bit better, because when I put the vocals in Sonar, it was all a bit messy. I couldn't quite hear what Josh and I were saying. That's the pads. Then we've got the low bass pad. Let's have a look at that. And you can see we've just got 2 Thor instances here. These 2 on the same octave, slightly detuned for a bit of thickness, and then this one on that octave below. And then exactly the same as the, you can see it's been copied, and you Control-Shift-Click, right-click, duplicate devices and tracks. And then panned left and right to make it a bit wider. And then we've got this big scoop there. Big scoop dog. And I'll show you what that does to the sound. That is where the majority of the sound was, but again I thought that was a bit overwhelming. Okay, and now for the big bass distortion. This one, I've got 2 different Thor instances, and these are both exactly the same, except this equalizer down here is cutting off the middle range of this Thor instance. And for some reason when they combine it makes quite a nice tone. I was literally just playing around at this point. I think it's quite a fun way to make different synths if you're lacking inspiration and don't quite know what to do. So that's the one without the mid scoop, and that's the one with it. And then they're both being run into a stereo imager, making sure it's all mono. Then into the Scream 4, which I've got the cut on just to remove a bit of the high end, because I thought that the damage it was doing was a bit too much. Because all the high end is obviously in the pads. And this is on tube mode with quite a lot of contour and bias, making sure it's nice and gritty, and a little bit of damage control there. And then the equalizer here is what's really shaping the sound. Changes it from that muddy mess to this really focused, nice synth. As I said, cutting out those mids, bringing up those highs really helps doing that, for me at least. The compressor for the side chaining, same thing going on with the bass pad as well, as you saw. And I turned the maximizer off in the end because I thought it sounded better without it. So that's how I made that huge, big old pad. Now there's quite a few more things to get through, but the next one you guys were asking about was those samples, so we'll take a little quick look at those. And I did those in Sonar because it's much better for working with audio in my opinion. As you could hear in the main section, got this build up, you can see it's just stuttered there. And then into it. And they've got these little snippets of the sample being used. I've got 2 tracks here, one of which is purely for the delay. So that kind of layers it up a little bit on certain sections I wanted to emphasize, because I didn't want the stuttered, I didn't want them to be echoing over because I thought it was a bit too messy. So I've literally just got 2 tracks, one of which has this FabFilter Timeless on it, which is a fantastic plugin for delays. FabFilter I've really started to get into now. I really like their EQing. As you can see here, put a really nice high end EQ on this, which if we take it off and put it back on, it really brightens it up. And then FabFilter Volcano too. This is a crazy one. It's a really interesting filter plugin that I haven't quite got my head around, but I've just been playing around with it, and there's some fantastic presets that with a little bit of changing can be turned into something really, really specific, and it like instantly makes the sounds a lot more focused and powerful. I'm not quite sure how to explain it. Play around with it yourself if you get a chance. To layer that up, because it was a bit thin on its own, in Reason here I had another pad going on, which we can have a look at here. And this pad is a nice simple analog oscillator and a couple of multi-oscillators at different octaves. This one's the middle, nice and focused, followed by the 2 thicker top and bottom ends. And it came out with this quite nice sound, a little bit of a mid-scoop there on the EQ. Again, you can see it really changes the sound with that EQing. Definitely with every single sound you get, see if you can make it sound a little bit better by playing with EQ. Then that's just running through. There's no reverb in the end. I wanted to make it tighter, as I said, with those sharp chops. So I ended up just putting the reverb on the top end of the sample. And that's how I made that. The other samples I used were in the drop.
Look at this girl to defend the world. We're gonna hit those springs like can't stop now.
And we've got these ones. I think I just googled sonic samples and saw what I could find. Delay on that ring one. Again, I've played with some of the fab filter stuff to see if I could thicken that up a little bit, but I didn't think in the end it really did much. Just compression, delay. Very simple. And it just works in the context of the song because I've got a pretty good beat going behind it. Just layered up there with quite a few different samples. You can see how I've really layered up those snares. You have to do that to get the massive dubstep snares, unless you're lucky enough to find a sample that's got all that frequency content in it initially. Then a couple of loops on top as well that I chopped into place. Now let's get to some of those basses.